Hi, this is Caroline van Kemenade from The Happy Sensitive, and this is a video about the difference between saying no and letting go. So, sounds like it's a really obvious, different process for each. But in practice, a lot of the times they kind of get interchanged. So one gets used as the other, especially for HSP. So I want to explain how that works and why that happens. So, for us HSPs, it can be harder to let go because we kind of process a lot more information about whatever it was that affected us. So things impact us more deeply. So when we have to let go of something, we have to let go of it let's say, on a more detailed, bigger level almost. It's like it's not just like a small file of what happened that we need to let go. It's like a huge file of all the information of everything that happened and that related to it that we have to let go of. Okay, so I have an article on that, so I'm not going to go into that here. But one thing that does tend to happen with that is that we can get really entangled in the stuff that it's really time to let it go. It's really time to move on. But because there's so much information that we have about whatever was that happened, we're still kind of plugged into processing all of that. And it can be really hard to notice how much of that is still going on, how much we're still thinking about something that happened, and how much we're still processing it. So that's one thing, that's the letting go. And the other thing, saying no, of course, is when something's going on in your life, you have to set boundaries and you have to stand up for yourself. And this can be hard for HSPs because we often feel how other people respond. And it's not just that we kind of read their body language, like often we actually feel their emotional energy coming at us. So if we are trying to stand up for ourselves and say something or do something that the other person doesn't like, not only are we faced with our own kind of insecurity around that, but we're also faced with their reaction that we are intensely affected by. So that makes saying no harder, because to be able to say no effectively, you need to have some of the tools and practices that allow you to disconnect from whatever the other person's reaction is and stay focused and stay clear in your own kind of space and your own needs and responses about what is happening. So there's some work around learning what happens on different levels, how to stay in your own space, let's say, how not to let other people's stuff get to you so much. And it's really not it's not the psychological issue so much. I mean, psychology comes into it, but there's a lot of different stuff that happens where we really have to learn how to stay clear and stay focused and within our own energy, as opposed to letting other people's energies and other people's opinions and emotions really kind of mess us around. Okay, so that's why saying no can be hard, but nevertheless is important. Now, of course, if you don't say no, then what's going to happen is other people are going to kind of whack you around like a tennis ball, depending on where they want to have you in their understanding of the world, right? So setting boundaries is really important, because setting boundaries and saying no is where we get to decide, like, oh, this works for me, this doesn't. Now, but because saying no is hard, what happens a lot of the time is that, we HSPs tend to be quite educated on spiritual principles. So we tend to be pretty aware that we need to let go. But then what we do this sneaky thing where we're like, I'm kind of secretly scared of saying no, and I don't really want to because it's hard. So I'm just going to tell myself that this is a perfect opportunity to just let go. I'm just going to let go of that. I'm just not going to worry about it. I'm just going to stay out of it. And what actually happens then is that there is a kind of denying of what is actually going on. And there's kind of a refusing to get involved. And there's a kind of refusing to stand up for your boundaries. And so the more you let go in this way, the more you'll find that you actually become a victim, and you get more and more overwhelmed, and you get more and more kind of sucked under by everybody else's stuff and what everybody else is doing or wants you to do. Because every time you're faced with some kind of conflict, you're like, oh, I'm just going to let go. And so letting go in that way means that you give the other person all the power and all the responsibility for deciding what's going to happen here. And that's just you cannot expect other people to do what is best for you because they don't know. They don't know. And even if they do know, they still have their own oxygen mask to put on first. So it really is our job to stand up for ourselves. And but like I said, because it can be uncomfortable, we can kind of take this kind of detour, which sounds very good. It sounds very good in theory. It sounds like it's in alignment with all kinds of mindfulness practices and all kinds of higher spiritual practices. Letting go. It sounds really good. So when you say to people, "Oh, I'm just letting go," they're like, "Oh, yay, good for you." But you have to be really clear about: are you just avoiding saying no, or are you really saying, are you really letting go of something that needs letting go of? Now, the reverse happens as well. So in areas where we really need to let go, we can have this tendency to keep saying no. And to keep saying, no, this person should not be this way, and this should not happen, and this should not be possible, and no, 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 but then we don't see that, and this has to do with, all the information from that situation that we're processing. So we get really caught up in it. And we go into kind of overanalyzing mode where we're trying to figure out a solution. We're trying to figure out a way to make it work or a way to change it, where really sometimes we have to just be like, okay, you know what? This is too big. And this is beyond my control. And this is also where we have to honor everybody else's free will. Everybody on this planet, everybody has free will, which means that they get to decide how they lead their life. Now, it doesn't mean they don't, have to deal with any consequences of what they're doing, of course, So the consequences is where you get to say no. You get to say, no, I don't like it when you do that, and I don't accept it. So you get to set a boundary with them, but you don't get to decide whether they're going to change their behavior, because that's their decision. You can only decide what you will tolerate and how you will respond when they don't respect your boundaries and when they don't respect your needs. But what those people do when you're not looking or when you're not there, it's none of your business. Really, okay, and this of course depends on what they're doing. Mass murderers, those kind of things, severe criminals. Yes, of course it is somebody's business. We have to intervene, but then it becomes a legal matter. And so if it's not a legal matter, then really you have no say in what somebody else is going to do, and also you don't have the full picture. So you don't have the full picture of everything that's going on in the world and what other people should be doing. So that's an area where it's really important to let go. And a metaphor to help with that is that just because you let go of wanting to control or wanting to influence or wanting to change the situation doesn't mean you don't get to say no. But these two have to kind of work hand in hand. So it's kind of like there's this huge, let's imagine there's this huge river flowing past the back of your house, and every half year it floods your garden, right? Well, you don't get to decide what the river does. The river's going to do that, and the river's going to rise and flood your garden. What you can do is you can build some kind of wall to keep the water out of your garden. Right? So if it's really important for you that there's no water in your garden, you can do something about it, because that garden is part of your property. So you can decide, you can build a wall, or you can, dig a canal around it. You can do whatever you want to set a boundary there. But then beyond that, you're going to have to let go. You're going to have to accept that the water rises and it's going to try and flood your garden unless you set a strong boundary that's going to keep the water out. And so in that way, you can allow the river to do what it does, and you can allow the river to keep flowing and keep flooding land, but you don't have to suffer because of it, because you found the solution. Similarly, if you find that you're trying to build a wall or some kind of construction and it doesn't work, and the garden keeps getting flooded, you can also decide to move to a different street. You get to decide, am I going to stay here in this situation? And am I going to let my garden be flooded every time, knowing there's nothing I can do about it? Or am I going to choose to relocate to a place where my garden is not going to get flooded because there's not that kind of a river problem? Okay, so the letting go and saying no actually really work hand in hand, where the saying no is about our property, boundaries, which when it comes to our persona, it comes to our kind of space, the space of the home that we have, the space of our kind of personal space, where you kind of get to decide like who gets to be in your personal space and who gets to be close to your heart and who gets to get your attention and what you're going to spend your money on and what you're going to spend your time on. All these things, that's within your personal control. But then you don't get to decide how other people spend their money or how other people spend their time or how other people deal with their personal, interactions. That's their stuff. You don't get to decide that. So that's where you need to let go. So I hope that was helpful, and I hope it also, helps you see how it's not, there's reasons why these two things get intertwined and get kind of, superimposed on each other, or one gets used instead of the other. There's reasons why as HSPs we tend to sometimes, try to let go instead of saying no, and also why we try to say no to stuff that we have to let go of. So I hope you see that, and if you find that you're doing that you don't beat yourself up about it, but that you realize, okay, wait, so I confuse these two, so that means I need help setting boundaries and knowing how to do that as an HSP, because there's a lot of, let's say, technical stuff that comes into it when you're HSP. There's a lot of worldview kind of tweaking that needs to happen that is very specific to HSPs. So that's one aspect of that. And the other thing is that you kind of catch yourself when you're doing that, and you're like, oh wait, am I really saying no to something that makes sense, or am I just do I have trouble letting go here, or am I trying to let go because I'm afraid of saying no? And then trying to see, like, wait, what is the part where I actually get to say no? Where is the part where I have some control, even if I'm afraid to exercise it? And where is the part where that's really just beyond me and I don't get to decide? Because when you get really clear about that, you really get to kind of draw that line, and you get to, you get much clearer about how to spend your energy and time on things that really are going to help you in your life and make, improve things for you, as opposed to wasting lots of time and energy on things that you really are beyond your control, or trying really hard to apply a methodology that is not, applicable to the situation.